Welcome to Guns, Guns, Gear, and Guns with Gary Gunderson. I am Gary Gunderson. The Spanish Mauser, designed in 1893, is just one iteration of Mauser on the long march to the classic 98 action. They can often get lost in the shuffle of various contract Mausers made for countries all across the world in this period. Overlooked and less expensive than most Mausers, are they underrated or rightfully relegated to second or even third tier? I am doing a collaborative video with The Blind Sniper, Mississippi Milsurp, and Movie Maker 225, where we are all discussing our opinions about these rifles. Now, when you say Spanish Mauser, you can be referring to a few different models. What I have is an 1893 Oviedo long rifle and an M1916 short rifle, so I will be focusing on those. The short rifle is still the 1893 action, so they are quite similar. They share many of the same hallmarks of the classic Mauser action. The bolt is removed, the same as a 98. It has a hold open on the last round empty. It has a 3-position safety flag. These are stripper clip fed with 7mm Mauser, and they have a hole or an indent on the left side for your thumb for right-handed shooters. It operates with a controlled feed from when it yes, it should. Well, it's supposed to operate with the controlled feed that it had earlier, but this one apparently is now messing up. Let's try that with the long rifle. There we go. Just had to snap it on there. I was probably being too gentle. Well, that's still dropping it. So, we will talk about extractors later in the video. The controlled feed is supposed to maintain control of the cartridge from when it is picked up from the magazine until it goes home. They have a staggered 5-round box magazine that's flush with the bottom of the receiver, unlike the earlier 1891 single stack Mausers. Apart from the bent bolt and the sling swivel position, they're practically the same from the rear up until you get to the receiver ring or the chamber. They have the same stock design. The bolts are interchangeable. I was able to swap these out. I didn't headspace them or anything. There's some difference in knurling on these safeties. The butt plates are also identical. The sling position is different, as I mentioned. The controls are similar. This one doesn't have any real markings. This, you still see the receiver stamp. The rear sights have the similar single button push to change. This one, though, has a ladder, while this one will raise as you increase distance. The style of band retainers and front band nose caps are the same, with a push in on the bottom for both areas. They take the same style of 1893 bayonets. They also had bayonets issued with the 1916s. I don't have any specific examples of those, but I have this Chilean bayonet for 1895, and it will mount on it just the same. One of the things that I appreciate about these rifles is the history behind them. Even though they were not involved in the Second World War, early 1893 rifles could theoretically have been involved in the Spanish-American War, but the conflict you're most likely to think of is the Spanish Civil War, which led to the rise of Franco's fascist regime. Usually a footnote to World War II as a training ground for weapons and tactics, the conflict there was actually pretty wild and is worth reading about in more detail if you have never done so. There are plenty of photos that show these rifles in the conflict and first-hand accounts. There were 3 types of rifles in use. The first was the long Mauser. These were seldom less than 20 years old. Their sights were about as much use as a broken speedometer, and in most of them the rifling was hopelessly corroded. About 1 rifle in 10 was not bad, however. Then there was the short Mauser, or musketoon, really a cavalry weapon. These were more popular than the others because they were lighter to carry and less nuisance in a trench. Also because they were comparatively new and looked efficient. Actually, they were almost useless. They were made out of reassembled parts. No bolt belonged to its rifle, and 3/4 of them could be counted on to jam after 5 shots. Excerpt from Homage to Calonia, George Orwell's personal account of fighting in the conflict. Well, with a ringing endorsement like that, what else can I say? These things were used hard in bad conditions, so the ones we have in good condition are somewhat miraculous. And I can't say with 100% certainty these are specifically Spanish Mausers he was referring to, but in other parts of the book he specifically identified Mosins as Russian rifles, he called out Winchesters, and mentioned German Mausers specifically, because Spain was the Ukraine of its day where everyone dumped all sorts of firearms in addition to the native ones. And not to contradict an actual, veteran who served with these, but with the examples of Spanish Mausers I think they do have a lot of good qualities. Then again, I never carried these out in the field for days at a time. In addition to the caliber, action, and history, I think one advantage on the collector's market today is that they're still relatively affordable military surplus with a lot of history. They're certainly creeping up in price with everything else, but you can snag a deal if you have some patience and wait with multiple auctions. Like I said, I did not have any of the actual 1893 or M1916 bayonets, but I do have this Spanish 1943 bolo bayonet made in Toledo, which apparently, according to what I've read, was hated by the troops because it is large and unwieldy, but dang if it doesn't look pretty sweet. One definite word of caution and a con that was echoed by several of my collaborators is that you should avoid using full power 7.62 NATO in the rifles that were converted to the caliber, as at least one has had an explosive experience. They were probably more likely to be 7.62 SETME, which is a lower power than 7.62 NATO, and if you go to 308 Winchester, it's higher than that. So if you have one of these in 7.62, definitely be careful. And though I think these look pretty slick in profile, I still would prefer to have a semi-pistol grip stock to hold onto it. But that's just a minor nitpick compared to some others. In discussing these rifles, everyone in our group working on our own videos came to fairly similar conclusions about the pros and cons. Out of the 4 of us, we all mentioned the 7mm Mauser cartridge as a positive. Several mentioned the controlled feed and cock on close as merits as well. We also, not surprisingly, all appreciated the history behind these rifles. Similar concerns were shared about the 7.62 conversion, sight pictures being less than ideal, weak extractors that are prone to breakage were mentioned by several too. I didn't see any conclusions I fundamentally disagreed with, and I think for a fun piece of history and military surplus, the Spanish Mausers can be nice rifles to add to your collection. Check out the links to the other channels in the description. Let me know in the comments what you think of Spanish Mausers, and if you'd like to see further collaborative videos like this on other series or countries' rifles. If you have made it to the end, please consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and sharing it with others. I also have a Patreon that you could join and a Discord channel as well. Check out other content on the channel, as I have covered a variety of firearms and also heavily the political side of firearm law as well. Thanks for watching.